Good morning, boys and girls. Today we are going to continue talking about elements of poetry. Today we are going to focus on how to summarize in order to deepen our understanding of a poem. When we summarize, we put the author's ideas into our own words. The first thing we do is we read part of the text. After that, we stop and we think about what the most important ideas are. Then we say them in our own words, and we continue repeating these steps for the rest of the text. In the end, we put it all together to say the most important ideas in a few sentences. When we summarize, it is very important to use details, use words and pictures from the text, and it's very important that when we summarize, we do not change the meaning of what the author is trying to tell us. Today we are going to read this poem called Big Brown Moose by Joyce Sidman. But before we start reading, I want you to take a look at the word hide. You might know that the word hide means to go and hide somewhere so that somebody cannot find you. But in this poem, the word hide refers to something else. The word hide is an animal skin. For example, the shoes are made of animal hide. So I want you to keep that in mind as we read the poem. Listen as I read the poem. Big Brown Moose by Joyce Sidman. I'm a big brown moose. I'm a rascally moose. I'm a moose with tough, shaggy hide. And I kick and I prance in a long-legged dance, with my moose mama close by my side. I shrug off the cold and I sneezed at the wind, and I swivel my ears in the snow, and I tramp and I trump over forest and swamp, 'cause there's nowhere a moose cannot go. I'm a big brown moose. I'm a ravenous moose, as I hunt for the willow and the yew. With a short and a crunch, I rip off each bunch, and I chew and I chew and I chew. When together we slump in a comfortable clump, my Montanuse mama and I give her a nuzzle, a velvety muzzle. Our frosty breath drifts to the sky. I'm a big brown moose. I'm a slumberous moose. I'm a moose with warm, snuggly hide. And I bask in the moon as the coyotes croon, with my moose mama close by my side. Let's take a look at this poem. I do see here that this poem is broken down into 5 stanzas. The author organized this poem into 5 different stanzas. Each stanza has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 verses. Now, as I was reading this poem, I did notice that the author organized the poem this way because each stanza describes something different that the moose is doing. For example, I can infer that in the first 2 stanzas, the moose is waking up, getting ready to start the day. It kicks and it prances. It shrugs off the cold as if it has been sleeping and laying in the snow. And then it goes for lunch. It goes and hunts for food. Then towards the end, it comes back with his mama. And then in the last stanza, I can see that it's time to go to bed. And it's nighttime. I can infer that because I know that at night the moon comes out. And the poem says that they bask in the moon and the coyotes croon. It also mentions that his mama is still close by his side, which allows me to infer that he is going to bed next to his mama. I also noticed that the author used repetition. In the first stanza, I see, I'm a big brown moose. In the third stanza, the author repeats this line again and again in the last stanza. I think the author did this in order to let us know how big and how brown this moose is, because it's important that when we read this poem, we make a mental image of what the moose looks like. And even though we have a picture here, we know that it's a big brown moose. So now we're going to use what we learned about summarizing to put the first stanza into our own words. Remember that when we summarize, we have to read the part of the text, we have to stop and think about the most important details, and then say them in our own words. So here's the first stanza. I am a big brown moose. I'm a rascally moose. I'm a moose with tough, shaggy hide. And I kick and I prance in a long-legged dance with my moose mama close by my side. So now that I have read the text, I'm going to find what the important details are. The moose is big and brown. The moose is rascally, which means that it's funny or does funny things. It has a tough, shaggy hide. Remember that the word hide refers to its skin. It kicks and it prances. And Mama Moose is close by its side. So now that I have highlighted the important details, I'm going to think about what this means to me, and I'm going to put it in my own words. The big brown moose is very playful. It has thick and wild fur, and it stays close to its mother. So this is what I think is happening in the poem in my own words. Notice how I did not change the meaning of any of the words, but I put them in my own words in a way that I understand it when I come back and read it. I use the important details in my summary. Now it is your turn to read the rest of the poem and summarize the last 4 stanzas. I want you to finish summarizing the rest of the poem. You can use this document that I have placed in Google Classroom or a piece of paper. Remember, you are summarizing stanza number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. You may go back and watch this video if you need to hear the poem one more time. Remember to submit your work in Google Classroom as soon as you are done. Now we're going to move on to writing. Yesterday, I showed you how I came up with a few words that reminded me about spring, which is the topic that I picked. And I wrote the first 4 verses of my poem. Wake Up Spring is the title of my poem because when I think about spring, I think about different things waking up. Wake up flowers, wake up weeds, wake up frogs, wake up seeds. Now I continue to think about what else I see in the spring. Wake up bears. I added this verse because whenever bears are waking up from hibernation, it's usually in the spring. Wake up leaves, because the leaves that were dry before are now turning green again. Wake up spring. And I'm going to repeat the last verse, which is the title of my poem, because I want to wrap it up by saying that I want spring to wake up. And spring includes all of these different things that I wrote down first. Notice that in my poem, I'm using some of the elements of poetry that we have learned about. I used repetition when I say wake up, because all of these things are waking up. I use rhyme, such as weeds, seeds, and leaves. And I also used figurative language, because remember, the flowers are not really waking up. Neither are the weeds, or the seeds, or the spring. I am comparing it to somebody waking up because in this spring, everything comes to life again, and that reminds me of somebody waking up. So now I want you to continue writing your poem. Use those words that remind you of your topic, and try to use those elements that we have learned about. For example, repetition, rhyme, figurative language, descriptive language, and also I want you to use words that help your reader create mental images of what's going on in your poem. I can't wait to read all your poems. See you tomorrow.